Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. This is Mr. Middle Path coming at you all with another video with a very, very special guest, Brother Bilal from the Features. Some of you all may know about his channel, some of you all may not know about his channel, but if you, regardless of where you stand, he's a very good brother. He's been talking about some very unspoken about issues in the Muslim Ummah, specifically those regarding racism within the Muslim communities, what goes on that we don't really know about, not just the Black community, but racism in general in the Muslim Ummah. Because when we think about racism, a lot of you guys, like myself, might just be thinking about, oh, you know, Saudi or UAE or whatever mistreats the immigrants coming from India and Pakistan and Indonesia, or, you know, my cousin couldn't marry that person from another culture. But I think it goes a lot deeper than this. So without further ado, Brother Bilal, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you're going to be talking about, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Ayakullah Sheikh. So first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to your channel. It's a great honor. You know, I stumbled upon your channel by accident, and you were talking about some incredibly important issues that just don't get touched at all. So I want to thank you for, you know, the material that you're putting out.
Alhamdulillah, man. The honor is mine, bro. The honor is mine for having you on, man. Really pleasure to have you on.
And the issue with racism, first of all, I said it many times, like, in my humble opinion, racism is probably the #1 thing that is destroying the Ummah today, right? Right. I would put racism, either racism or riba. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? A tie between both. But if you break down the bare essentials of what is the main problem with the Ummah, you know, along with all these Aqidah issues and infighting, but if you break it down, it really comes down to racism. Racism as an institution, as a political tool, as a means to divide people and whatnot. And the real crux of the problem comes down to people not understanding what racism is or how it works, or having these type of weird, very, like, I want to say, like, they undermine or they trivialize racism to feelings and thoughts about other people. And that's not what racism is at all. You understand? So I want to break it down. First, I want to show you this video to show how serious the problem is in the Ummah, okay? It's not a joke, right? It's a very serious problem. And I have yet to find a single Muslim on YouTube or otherwise that is actually talking about this, other than me. I don't know anybody else. And alhamdulillah, you invited me to your channel to actually. I honestly, I don't know a single Muslim on YouTube or an imam or a scholar that has addressed this issue, and it's a major issue. Right, so I'm just gonna play this video. Just let me share the screen here. Okay.
Don't forget to share the audio.
Share audio too as well.
Yeah, right. Share audio.
Okay.
Bismillah.
Bismillah.
This man, stripped naked, is being told to stay silent as he's burnt with what's said to be molten plastic. In another video, people are being beaten as kidnappers discuss ransom money. These videos are reportedly of Sudanese refugees being abused in Libya. Al Jazeera cannot verify the pictures. But the humiliation and abuse of African migrants here is not new. Libya is a major hub for human smugglers and traffickers who use the country as a transit for a perilous boat journey to Europe. Some officials have been accused of taking bribes to free people from illegal detention centers where people are kept under inhumane conditions. But Libyan forces deny the allegations that some are involved in rape, forced labor, and even murder. The poorly equipped Navy and Coast Guard say they're doing Europe's job of policing 1,700 kilometers of coastline and the Mediterranean. The Navy spokesman says the issue of migrant abuse is being fabricated to force international intervention.
They want to make illegal immigrants victims and to make Libya look like the culprit. Perhaps when these things proliferate, the international community will be urged to intervene in Libya under the pretext of illegal immigration. This is part of their plan.
Libya has been fragmented between two governments and many militias vying for power. Last year, the videos of African migrants being sold in slave auctions sparked an international outcry. But Libyans accuse European nations of not doing enough and say the onus of dealing with migrants from across Africa has been dumped on Libya.
Libya did not and cannot play the role of a policeman. This relationship needs to be organized. An international conference between Libyans and Northern European states should resolve how Libya can deal with part of the matter, as all of it can't be imposed on Libya. We cannot be a cemetery, a residence, or a jail.
Despite the crackdown by Libyan and Italian navies, more than 100,000 migrants reached Italy last year. At least 3,000 people died in boats which couldn't withstand the rough Mediterranean waters. Rights groups say the strategy to turn people away hasn't worked and opened new avenues for abuse and exploitation. After years of failure, Europe and Libya need a new approach. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera.
Okay.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, that's just one. That's like the tip of the iceberg.
This is Democracy Now!
1 second, brother.
democracynow.org,
Yeah, no problem.
Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
Do you want to give the background on this for the viewers, inshallah?
Yeah. So, with the Libyan situation, I mean, after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi and his regime, right, the country was split up into different factions, right, and then you had a man named Haftar trying to unite the country, and then you had these other type of militia type groups that were backed by Western colonial powers, right? So, but anyways, what happened was Libya now became this type of a hub for Black Africans to travel through to try to get to Europe. And what's happening in Libya is that these same Libyans that went through the civil war are kidnapping Black Africans, including Muslims, enslaving them, right? Raping women, including Muslim women, and forcing Black Muslim women, including Black Muslim women, into prostitution and sex slavery, right? Oh, and you saw there the torture. They're holding Black Africans for ransom. Mm-hmm. And I have yet to find a single Muslim, anybody talk about this. There's a YouTuber that talk about Haftar day and night. Day and night, he's talking about Haftar, the war criminal Haftar, right? We won't mention his name, right? But he did not mention this problem, which Haftar ain't got nothing to do with. You understand? He did not mention this. He's basically standing up for the poor Libyans against Haftar. But what about this? And this right here, again, it goes back to the incredible, like eye closing. You know, close your eyes to the racism situation in the Ummah, right? And how you know you have all these people, imams and YouTube guys talking about there's no racism in Islam, and I agree there is no racism in Islam, but there are a hell of a lot of Muslim racists, and they practice racism in a real tangible way, as you just saw. And that's just one video, right? One video. Recently, there was a protest in Britain, right? And against this what's going on in Libya with the Black Africans and whatnot. And I only saw one hijabi out of that entire protest. One. You understand?
So I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, let's try and play devil's advocate here from the point of view of a detractor or someone who disagrees with you. What if they were to say, oh, well, this doesn't prove racism. This is just maybe criminal elements or opportunistic tribes kidnapping migrants, any migrants. And if they had happened to be, you know, white migrants from another country or Syrian refugees, they would have done the same thing. They would have kidnapped them, ransomed them, and sold them into slavery if they could.
And those people who said that would have to prove that.
Mm-hmm.
On my channel, we don't just deal with what's happening in Libya. We deal with what's happening in the Muslim world at large.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And we point out the blatant racism that's going on in the Khalij, in Africa, in Lebanon.
Yeah.
You know, we point all this stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
How for example, in the Khaliji countries, like the Gulf countries, where they would rape their maids, send them back home pregnant. We put all the goods out, so if you're going to say now, oh, this can happen to anybody and it's opportunistic, in Saudi Arabia right now, and in most Gulf countries anyway, not just Saudi, they allow Syrian refugees and Palestinians. Like I lived in Saudi Arabia for 9 years,
mm-hmm.
right? We don't hear about these people being exploited, but we not only do we hear, but we have ample evidence of South Asians,
mm-hmm.
the women, the Indonesians, the Filipinas, African women being exploited. So many stories, right?
Yeah.
Eyewitness stories. So those people are saying, "Oh, it's just opportunistic." These are the types that have all kinds of excuses for the oppressor. But when it comes to Black people, they got no love or sympathy for any type of anti-Black racism at all. And that's why I say that Muslims in general, they don't understand racism. They don't know what it is. They don't know what the heck they're talking about. They don't know how deeply the Ummah is actually affected by racism. And they themselves practice racism without even knowing that they're practicing racism, right? So we should actually define what racism is, because
go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Racism, they think racism is a feeling that you have against somebody else because of the color of their skin. And this is what Muslims say, oh, I don't hate you because you're Black or you're brown. I love all my Muslim brothers, and therefore I'm not a racist. You understand? That's what they think racism is. You understand? They think it's some sort of arbitrary feeling that you have. And that's not what racism is, okay? Before the 1450s, there was no such thing as called race. What you had was tribes, nations, and religious groups, but you didn't have a thing called race. You understand? Right? So in the 1450s, a guy named Henry the Navigator, he went to the west coast of Africa. He was from Spain. He went to west coast of Africa, and he returned with 16 Black slaves, right? Because when you think about slavery, what people think of slavery in our time, they think about the anti-Black slavery, but they don't understand how it started with, like, how it became an anti-Black thing, because slavery is a very old institution, right? It's something that's been done for even ancient times, even ancient Rome, and you know what I mean? So slavery is nothing new. Even it's mentioned in the Quran about Bani Israel, how they were slaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how did slavery turn into a race thing, right? People don't understand what it is, right? So when he returned with these 16 Black slaves, he gave them to the Catholic Church to use how they saw fit. You understand? So before this time, slavery was a tool used for indebtedness, for crime, for religious persecution, for indentured servitude, and for prisoners of war. And this is even in the Islamic concept of slavery. This is the Islamic concept of slavery. Like if you go and you make jihad, right, or or somebody attacks you as a Muslim Ummah and they lose,
you got to do something with the captives.
Exactly. So you take them as prisoners of war. These prisoners of war are called slaves. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or indentured servants. They can actually pay off their servitude through work, and then they become free again. You understand? That's what slavery has always been throughout history. So after the church, they used these Black slaves till about 1488 or so. A man named Pope Innocence. He said, you know what? Having these Black people around is a good thing. We can use them as we like, So around this time, this was around the time the concept of race started, because you imagine these Black people, Now, mind you, there were Black people in Europe even before this time, because the Moors, they were actually running Europe for about 800 years, right? There are Black Muslims who went to Europe. They taught Europeans how to bathe, how to read, how to, build, all these type of things, right? So all that kind of, so like, the dark ages of Europe, that was pretty much the bright ages of Islam, right? So when the Moors came to Europe, they were already mixing with Europeans, particularly in Spain. That's where we have Andalus and these type of things, right? But there was no slavery during like this type of race-based slavery. You understand? It wasn't until this man came back with these West Africans, these Black West Africans, and sent them directly to the Catholic Church that the concept of race started. You understand? So
concept
around
of
this
race-based slavery is what you mean.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Not like tribal slavery or war. Or
exactly. Before that, it was a tribal thing. It was a religious thing.
Loser becomes a slave, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You understand? So we will enslave whoever, like the people who are different religions or different tribes, or people who are warring with you, or if you became a criminal, or if you did something against. This was very popular in Europe, anyways. Like if you did something against the church, you know what I mean? They would persecute you religiously. You know what I mean? That kind of slavery was popular, right? In Europe, anyways, right? Even the word slavery, the word itself, it comes from Slav, right? From Slavonia, right? Because the Slavs were pretty much the slave type tribe in Europe, and so that's how the word. That's the etymology of the actual word slavery, right? So, but anyways, so Columbus around this time, Henry, the traveler was traveling. Columbus around this time he was trying to find new routes to Asia, right? So try to get around the Muslim world. So he had a theory that the world was round. So let me go around and try to get to India through the opposite way, instead of trying to go through the Turks, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what he ended up doing, he discovered, right? He discovered the Indies, or what we now know as the West Indies, because he thought he landed in India, right? Right. So he discovered this land, and that's what we call the West Indies, right? Because he thought he was legit in India, but he didn't know he wasn't in India. But then he started traveling around these lands. He said, you know what? There's a lot of land here, and it's not very populated. There's just a few Indians here and there.
And it's not well defended either. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Not well defended. There's so much land. And what was going on in Europe at that time? What was happening in Europe was crime, was famine, was disease, right? And Europe was kind of like losing its grip on society at this time. So when he came back, right, and he told, he went back to Portugal, and he said, look, I discovered all this land over here in the 1500s. It gave the Europeans hope, you know what I mean? And that's when racism started. That's the first time we started seeing racism. And that's when in Spain, they came out with what's known as pure blood laws, right? The pure blood laws. You understand? And anybody can look this up, where basically, what's a pure blood law? You have to prove that your grandmother and grandfather on both sides of your parent, your mother's and your father's sides, were pure white descent. You understand?
Did the pure blood laws start then, or did it start from when they were trying to do the Inquisition and getting rid of?
That's the same time, or all around the same time. Okay. All around the same time, around the Inquisition. You understand? So if you prove that your grandparents on both sides, right, were pure white, then this was all what was going on at Europe at that time. So the Muslims now and the Jews in Europe, they were being persecuted, right? As you mentioned about the Inquisition, how do they know who the Muslims were by their darker skin, right?
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So, and how do they know well, they knew the Jews by the names, and they were being forced to convert to Christianity or whatnot. And now, now that Columbus discovered all this land, what they started doing is they started this project in the New World where they would send, you know, like people to the New World to try to develop this land in order to bring the richest back to where? To Europe.
Europe, yeah.
You understand?
Mhm.
Right? And that's when racism, this is the whole
That's when it became crystallized legally, basically.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? So what is racism? Racism, now you find with the pure blood laws, that's when you start seeing the superiority of race, like the white race is superior over the black race. And that's when you start seeing the Catholic Church using the Bible itself to say that black people are the cursed seed of Ham. We are the Canaanites and we are cursed, and we are therefore supposed to be forever enslaved to the brothers of the sons of Noah.
Mhm.
That's when you start seeing all this stuff. And this is the first time where slavery was an institution that anybody that was enslaved not only for their life, but their children's lives and their children's lives. And they didn't own their own bodies, their own time. They could not garner their own wealth, right? All their wealth, their time, their labor was done specifically for the benefit of white people. You understand? That's racism. Racism is the idea that your superiority of your race dictates where you are in society. The Spanish, they called it, and in Spanish it's called caste. That's like a caste system, right? And race is raza. I can't end my Spanish now, but you know what I mean? But, yeah, but that's what it is. That is racism. It's not appropriate even I understand what Muslims mean when they say there's no racism in Islam. But what the Prophet ﷺ was saying was that what he was fighting against was prejudice, prejudice and bigotry. You understand? So, and your concept of racism is actually what is prejudice. You understand? The hating of people based upon their lineage or their color or whatever. That's prejudice. Because in Islam, if you fight against prejudice, anything more than that should be fought even harder. You understand?
Alhamdulillah. So if you read the life of the narrative of Frederick Douglass, he mentions that there was someone he knew who his job was to break slaves. So he would borrow slaves from other people. He'd break them in, meaning that make them obedient. And Frederick Douglass wrote about how he got into a fight with him, and the man was afraid of his reputation. So he didn't broadcast that he needed to like kill the slave or punish the slave. But what I read from that was very interesting enough, was that Frederick Douglass was talking about how the man had children from some of the slave women, and they would be born as slaves working the fields, and he would never say that he was the father. Everyone just kind of knew it, and how dehumanizing that was, as compared to, because I'm sure some non-Muslims watch this video, which is why I want to mention this point, is that as opposed to Islam, for example, where a sultan or a king could have a son through a concubine or a slave woman, and that son would be a legitimate heir to the throne. And in some cases in Muslim history, we had kings or sultans and so forth who were from slave backgrounds. And one of those being the Mamluk dynasty, if you want to look up. If anyone who's not Muslim is interested in learning about it, you can look into the Mamluk dynasty. And I believe some writers such as Jonathan Brown have a book on the history of slavery in Islam. All right. But yeah, I just wanted to interject that point and carry on, brother.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the North American experiences of slavery, these types of children were actually seen as higher value than the pure black children. But there were in the States, they have something called the 1 drop law, right? That if you have 1 drop of black blood in you, then you were black. You understand? So the classifications of Black people are
Then everyone is Black, if that's the case.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. But yeah, this is a real thing, right? So they would classify you know, your tone, I guess, by mulatto, octoroon, like these are actual terms of slave children, right? And remember, in the idea of racism, this whole concept of racism is to extract wealth and labor out of other people and make sure that they never have a chance to economically be independent based upon race. You understand? So now what you have is a system that if you're born into the system, by birth, you're a slave, right? This is the first time this concept was actually introduced into the world through Europeans, right? And now what you see happening in Libya is the same thing, you understand? Where Muslims are practicing like pure unadulterated racism in its purest form, and Muslims aren't saying anything about it. Are these people being kidnapped because of they're prisoners of war? They're detractors of religion? Are they criminals? No, they're being kidnapped and sold into slavery and sex slavery simply because they're Black. And the religion, even their Islam, doesn't save them from that. And you saw in the clip that Sudanese were being tortured, Muslims, okay, even Somalians being tortured, raped. You know what I mean? So where's this Islam first now?
How are they justifying this, by the way, kidnapping Muslim immigrants and Muslim migrants and saying we're going to sell you in slavery? And who would purchase them? Other tribes, or how exactly is this working in Libya?
Well, you know, that's why I say that racism, in my humble opinion, is the number one thing that Muslims have to tackle, because this is not like a thing that just happened overnight. You understand? When racism was introduced to Europe and the Arabs caught on to it, they started practicing racism even way back hundreds of years ago themselves. They started kidnapping Black Africans and into slavery. And this is something that's known, this is like written about, you probably know about it as well, like the Arabs and even Africans would kidnap other Black Africans and sell them to Europeans as a business. You understand? So this is not a new thing. It's something that's been boiling over for hundreds of years. And just because we see the video footage in Libya doesn't mean that it started in Libya. You understand what I'm saying?
We just know about it in Libya.
We just know about it now because now they're video. And the silence of the Muslims is deafening. You understand? Because when we talk about racism, when we go back to like the ideas of racism and whatnot, people think it is just arbitrary feelings. Oh, I don't like you because you're Black. This is nonsense. You know, that right there, that is what the Prophet ﷺ, what he was speaking against when he was telling Abu Dhar, right? When he called Bilal ibn Rabah the son of a Black woman, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he told Abu Dhar, you know, you still have the trace of Jahiliyyah in you. Right? That's what he was talking about, the feelings, right? So if he was talking about the feelings, and how much more making an entire institution of profiteering based upon the color of people's skin. You understand?
So I guess I want to circle back to, I understand what you're saying. I want to circle back to the original, one of the earlier points I made, which was like some detractors might say, well, no, this isn't racism. This is just, you were saying opportunistic. This is just opportunistic. And look at, for example, the human traffickers might kidnap Syrian refugee women and sell them into prostitution or pimp them or so forth, or any basically pretty woman, doesn't matter what their race is, if they're in a vulnerable position, the human traffickers will catch them and so forth. So what would you say about that? What would be your response to someone who would say that?
Yeah, that is opportunistic, what's happening in Syria. You understand?
Yeah.
But what we're seeing in Libya, because there is a civil war that broke out in Libya, why not enslave the
Other Libyans.
Exactly.
Mm,
You feel
I
me?
see. Yeah,
That's not what's
that makes
happening.
sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
You understand? What's happening is you're seeing the refugees who are Black, you kidnap them and then you sell them into, you understand?
Yeah.
Totally different thing.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Totally different thing. So
do we know who they're selling them to? Do we know if they're selling them to other Libyan tribes or to Europeans, or do we know where they're going? Where the people that are being sold are going?
well, there's an entire industry behind it, and Europe has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Europe has a lot, and as a matter of fact, again, because we know this is a pure racist system, right? It is Europe, the powers in Europe that are actually, they want the system of slavery to continue in Libya. And so them behind the scenes, they were actually working to keep that system of slavery going in Libya. Not to mention the system of slavery that they set up in the Middle East as well. You understand, with the Iqama system, right? Let's call it what it is, a slavery. All this Iqama system, that's actual, it's actually slavery.
Explain the Iqama system for those that don't know, please.
Okay, so the Iqama system, what it is it's a system of servitude for private citizens of Arab countries where they employ labor from specific poorer countries in their countries, and the private citizen now becomes the type of whatchamacallit, the liaison between that person and the government. So now the government has nothing to do so much with their passports, their status in the country. It's the actual citizen. You understand?
We need to break this down more for those living in the West, for those living in America. I think this needs to be explained on a deeper level, because I think people hearing this might not actually get just how significant this is. So, like, first of all, this is in mainly the Gulf states, not in like Egypt and so forth, and Libya, not Libya, right? Like, this is not in other states so much as it is in the Gulf states. And I think
even in Lebanon, they have this type of system.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they have the same type, yeah.
And I think another important point is that it's specific to poorer countries as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Please explain this more. Like, this is actually really important.
Okay, so now, for example, if you think about in Canada or America or whatever, right? If somebody from another country wants to work, for example, in Canada or America, they have to basically apply for something called a work visa. The government issues it to the individual. They come to the country, they keep their passport, and they work for that specific company or whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the Middle East, it's not like that, right? What happens is the individual, like a private citizen, like me, for example, I can hire somebody from some Bangladesh or Africa, whatever, as a whatchamacallit, as a worker in my country, in my company or my house or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Right. I pay so much money to the government, then I control that individual's passport, their pay, their work hours, everything. I control everything about that individual's
and they
life.
have no recourse. Yeah.
There's no recourse for that individual because I am in control of that person's Iqama. It's my signature, or Iqama in English is visa, right? Mm-hmm. That's how you say visa. I'm in control of that person's visa. You understand? It's my signature on that person. I own them.
Basically, you own them. And this is completely different. For those viewing, this is completely different than, for example, someone from a rich country gets hired from a company in Saudi Arabia. He needs their sponsorship. He's going there. He still has his visa. He still has all of his things. So, for example, if I was to apply for a job in Saudi, they wouldn't own me. I would still have all of I'd need their sponsorship. They could kick me out of the country when they want. But that's completely different than like a poor Bangladeshi guy or a poor African going and working there, and his passport and all of his papers are being held by the person that
the individual.
Yeah, by the individual. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, mind you, right? Why does it work like that? It's the same system for the Bangladeshi or the American. It's because you're an American citizen, right? And you have recourse if these Gulf Arabs get out of line.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And your experience as an American citizen or US citizen or Canadian citizen or British citizen is going to be completely different than the Bengali or the Indian or the Pakistani or the Filipino, whatever. It's going to be completely different, right? In these countries, they have to go to headhunters. They have to pay the headhunter money to find them a job in the Middle East so they can work in the Middle East to begin with, right? And once they get to the Middle East, that the person that they're under kifal or their visa ship, right, takes their passport, right? So they don't leave. And that's why you have so many of these stories of Sri Lankans or South Asians not being paid for 6 months, a year, you know, because they can take advantage of that system. You understand? Mm-hmm. It's a slave. Let's call it what it is.
Slave system.
But this whole system, even though it's a slave system, right? The reason why they're able to get away with it, again, is because this white supremacist racist system is not something that just kind of developed all willy-nilly and overnight. It's something that was, developed for centuries and perfected, you know, so that the system can keep going, and they just change language, change certain rules and modify this and that in order
and the
to
effect will be the same. Yeah,
the effect will be exactly the same. You understand? Mm-hmm. And that's why Muslims in general, they're so affected by racism, they don't actually realize it. The same people that are destroying the Muslim countries are the same people that Muslims are dying to get into their countries, to participate in that white supremacist system that destroyed their countries in the first place.
Well said. Yeah. For those who are listening, I mean, if you live in the West, like Britain or in America, especially in America, I mean, the system is still there, but like Brother Bilal was saying, it's been perfected. So for example, I was listening to this on one of the radio stations where they had a guest come in and talk about how the school districts are divided in a way where the poorer Black communities are kept out of the district. So basically think about it like a map. You cut up the district in a certain way, and that community that should have been in this district, because its location is in the district, they'll just draw a line around it so that it gets cut out, and that is placed in the poorer district. And those usually happen to be basically the Black communities are all going to be lumped into the poorer district. So
that's called
gerrymandering. Yeah,
that's called gerrymandering, and America's only, as far as I know, the only country to actually practice. That's a purely 100% racist. There's no other way to describe it, right? Mm-hmm. It's the whole idea behind gerrymandering is to lock out Black people from participating in democracy. You understand? That's the entire idea behind it, and it's still being practiced to this day. Right? Yeah. You understand? So go ahead.
How did they? When I say they, I mean like Western imperial powers. How did they implement this racist structure or this racist government structure into the Muslim world in a way that, like you said, like you might find a Muslim who's like, I'm not racist. I love my brothers and sisters, some no matter where they're from, but not realize that the system is the way that it is. So how did they set it up, or how did they implement it in such a way where even some people who notice it or don't notice it don't really know what to do with it, or don't really realize that this is what they're involved in the first place?
That's a long story. You can go back to the Ottomans, right, for this particular part of this story, right? But really, in terms of modern times, I would say that it kind of was, I want to say, like, do you know Kemal Ataturk?
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Who doesn't know that guy?
Yeah, right. So Kemal Ataturk, he's the one who kind of like spearheaded the downfall of the Ottoman Empire, right? Right. And again, it's not something that happened overnight. There's something that was planned for years and years and years and years, right?
Yeah, and it should be noted that he was a well-known Freemason as well. you know,
Yeah.
we should know that. But go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
Yeah. So his whole idea was to end the Islamic Empire and build a what he called a Turkish nation, right? Right. So we're going to get rid of all this cultural superstition, these cultural ideas, and now bring Turkey into the modern world. Because for a few hundred years, Turkey was seen as by the Europeans as they were called the sick man of Europe, because of the printing press. All because of the printing press, because they would not allow the printing press to come into the Muslim world. And because of that, Europeans were able to share their ideas, and the Muslim world lagged far behind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, the reason why I say around this time, because again, the Arabs, they were involved in capturing Black people and selling them to slavery and all this kind of stuff. Right. And that was like their business model for getting wealth, right? However, in this time is when we saw nationalism as an idea, as a concept, first start creeping into the Muslim world. And it started with Kemal Ataturk, because there was no such, at this time, it was kind of the Muslim Ummah, right? But now we start seeing nationalism. He wanted to build a Turkish country, right? So after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, after World War I, we saw the British now discovering oil in the Middle East, right? And they basically told the Arabs at this time, Abdulaziz bin Saud and these Arabs, and they said, look, man, let's make a deal, right? Right? We know we've been surveying your land and whatnot, right? You have the land and the resources, but we have the know-how to build this. So let's work together and extract this oil from your land. And that's when around the time of Aramco, the birth of Aramco. But what they were doing, where were they getting the labor from? This is the $1 million question. At that time, where were they getting the labor from? Does anybody know?
Please enlighten us.
They were getting it from Black Africans. And who taught them that?
So the Europeans came in and basically said, this is the system.
Exactly. That's how it started. Right? So they would get the slaves from Black Africa, and they were the ones who were the labor in the desert at those times. And then when in the 60s, I think it was the 60s, King Faisal, he said he officially ended slavery, and that's when the Iqama system started, and they started employing the Muslims from the Indian area, like Pakistan and Bangladesh and whatnot. And that's how the whole kind of Iqama system started, right? But that whole system was developed because of Europeans. You understand? They were the ones who taught the Muslims about nationalism. It was whatchamacallit, Gamal Nasser, who started teaching the world about Pan-Arabism and Arab nationalism and whatnot. Where did he get it from? Europe. And then we started seeing the slave systems being developed in the Middle East and whatnot. And that's how it all started, right? So, and that's why Muslims have this type of very nonchalant attitude when it comes to anti-Black racism, because they've been practicing it for so long.
When you say a nonchalant attitude towards anti-Black racism, like qualify that first. How is it that Muslims are okay with that? Or in your estimation?
Exactly, that's what I want to know.
Okay.
I want to know how Muslims are okay with this.
I'm thinking about it. Look, like, let's say someone's watching this and he doesn't know, or he or she does know, but they say, "Wait, I'm not racist. I'm not part of the system. How is it that I am involved in something that I don't even want to be a part of?" So, when you say that they're part of that they're involved in the system, do you mean that they're silent about it and they're just, or do you mean that they're ignorant about it, or do you mean that they're actively practicing this type of racism?
All of the above. And this is the majority of the people anyways, right? The majority of people are like this, you understand? So the reactions I get from the general Muslim, right, is when we talk about this, right? Any general Muslim, you talk about anti-Black racism, their go-to move is to say, oh, don't be about that Black stuff. We're all Muslims, you know, Muslim akhu Muslim and no racism Islam and all this kind of nonsense, right? That statement in itself is very racist, right? To dismiss
all the problems.
Exactly. Just dismiss it. And the second something happens in Palestine, we gotta protest. Second something happens in Syria, we gotta donate and fund and everything like that. The second something happens with the Rohingya or the Uyghurs, and every single Muslim group that has suffered, Black people have always been the first in the front line to help support these groups. Every single last one. But when it comes to the Black causes, that's when all the excuses come. That's when we hear every single excuse in the book. And that's because of inherent racism from the Muslims themselves, right? Because they would never use these types of speech for any other group, and they don't. That's the reality. They just don't, you know? But when it comes to for example, what we just mentioned in Libya, and I want, if I get a chance, I want to show a different video as well, just to show you how deep this racism thing goes. So
please show it now if you want to show it.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Let me share it, inshallah. Now, this video is going to show you that how Europe is in cahoots. It's just a short clip. Is in cahoots with Libya in this particular matter to prevent Black people from going into Europe. You understand? That's why it's being exasperated in Libya, and Muslims are happily participating. Somalia.
In 2017, footage from Libya showed migrants being sold as slaves.
These men are sold for 1,200 Libyan pounds, $400 apiece.
The exploitation prompted outrage and was described as modern slavery, a term now used for the 40 million people worldwide that are being exploited. From trapped construction workers in Dubai to women exploited for sex by traffickers.
I was also taken into a few other countries for the sole purpose of being trafficked and being sold.
The fight to end modern slavery has become a celebrated cause, championed by celebrities,
beaten, starved, tortured, raped,
and governments.
This house and this country that is leading the campaign against modern slavery.
But this fight isn't completely what it seems. While EU governments promise to tackle slavery in Libya,
il est indispensable de prévenir ces situations. Les dénoncer, les condamner sur le plan du droit international est indispensable.
Behind closed doors, they spent millions strengthening borders and returning people to overcrowded Libyan prisons.
Did you hear that?
It was a policy that left more people at risk of being sold into slavery. Governments have pledged millions to tackle modern slavery.
We're going to deal with human trafficking and end the scourge of modern-day slavery.
But how genuine are these attempts?
There's a lot of propaganda the government's put out today to say that they want to address human trafficking.
And is the term being used to justify tough immigration policies? This is how governments are misleading us about their fight to end modern slavery.
That's what it's about. That's what it's about. To prevent Black people from getting to Europe. The same thing that's happening in the States is happening in Europe. So now you see in the States where you have a hell of a lot of people from the Hispanic lands, like Guatemala and El Salvador, these type of places, making migration from these places to the States. And what are they doing in the States? They're putting them in concentration camps. Same type of thing. They're raping them, they're killing them, they're disappearing them, they're separating them from their children. You understand? But the difference is that white people are a hell of a lot more savvy with their racism than Arabs. That's the only difference. They're a lot more smart and strategic in the way that they tackle these things. So they will go in front of the camera and say, "Oh, we have to end, human trafficking." They will say that in front of the camera when they are like Donald Trump himself is like a major human trafficker from before he was president. He hired all kinds of illegal immigrants. You know what I mean? Yeah, like what? You know what I mean? They are Machiavellian when it comes to controlling human beings. You feel me? And it's really time for Muslims to wake up and open their eyes and smell the coffee, so to speak.
Besides smelling the coffee, what can Muslims actually do about this? Like, what would be some action steps to act? Like, what would be a solution?
Well, to be honest, I always say that Muslims, first of all, we have to get on code, right? Which means that we have to be a lot more serious about brotherhood, not the veneer brotherhood. That's just all this talk, oh, we're all like just a speech of brotherhood. But we have to be serious about real brotherhood and real unity. You understand? Like,
how do we do that when many people think that they are unified? Like, there's many people with the illusion that there is no racism, we're cool, there's nothing like this going. Like, how many people knew about this before they saw this video, right? So how do we get unified when people already think that they are unified, and the only thing is that, oh, well, I guess I can't, her wali didn't want to let me marry her because I'm like from a different country or whatever. But that's the extent of what people think is the problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's just like a microcosm.
Yeah,
of the actual issue. You understand? It's, as you can see, it's much deeper than that, right? So when I say we have to be on code, I mean, like, we have to build strong, functional communities and independent communities that don't depend on the system. You understand? If you look like at, for example, the Jews, right, and what they've established in the West, right? Any Jewish community that you find in the West, right? If, like, there's a one in Toronto on Bathurst, there's one in New York. If you go to these Jewish communities, they look like completely different countries. If you go to these communities, you don't even think you're in the same country. Why? They're completely independent. They're functional, right? They have their own institutions, right? You know what I mean? Do you know the brother Michael Abraham by any chance?
Yes.
Right. So he wrote this book about educating Muslim students. You understand?
I actually just recently, last week, I posted a video where we did a video together.
Oh, wow, mashallah.
Yeah, just really, yeah.
Excellent, right? So I read his book, right? And he wrote this book specifically for teachers, like educators, on how to teach Muslims when they go to school, right? And there's one big elephant in the room with that book, right? Is that, why are Muslims not producing their own teachers? Why is it only the converts?
He advocates for Muslims to become public school teachers in the system. And yeah, he's advocated for that for some time now. And
exactly. But if you go to the Jewish community, they have their own teachers. The Chinese, they have their own teachers. Why are Muslims, and we're claiming to have the truth, depending on other groups to teach? You're depending on your enemy to teach your kids. Let's call it what it is. Right?
So
and the brother Michael Abraham did a great service in writing this book, and he put in a whole lot of hard work into that book. But again, the thing is, it requires hard work to build a community. If you're not building a functional community based upon a real Islamic unity, and your whole existence is to assimilate into the devil's system and Pharaoh's house, Pharaoh's kingdom, then how are you going to win?
So hold on, let's pretend that I'm in denial, all right? And I'm like, no, we have our own communities, right? We have our own Islamic schools. We literally have our own masajid and centers and whatever, and a lot of Muslim communities are already pretty insular. So don't we already have that?
Those communities that you call insular Islamic communities are not. They're what you have are cultural based communities. And you can literally see which culture it is based upon the language they're speaking and the way that they look. You understand? We don't actually have functional, independent, purely Islamic communities.
That are, when you say purely Islamic, do you mean that it is multicultural, or do you mean that it is just purely Islamic and we don't care where you're from or what your background is, you are welcome?
Yeah, like this.
Like that. Yeah, that is hard to find. That is hard to find.
We're talking about Michael Abraham. He mentions in the beginning of his book that Arabs were coming from since the 30s to the States, right? And they were given the the classification of being classified white. Why is that important? Because if you're classified as white, you don't get redlined, you don't get gerrymandered, as you mentioned, right? You can go and get tax dollars to build your institution, these type of things. That's why that was important. You understand? In the 1990s, was it 1990s? I can't remember. But anyways, it's fairly recent, right? The Arab community, and as a matter of fact, what is that lady's name from the squad, man? Rashida Tlaib, right? She was trying to spearhead this movement, right, for the Arabs to be classified as an ethnic minority. So they want to move from becoming white to becoming ethnic minority. Now, why do you think that is? Oh, pray tell, why would you want to become an ethnic minority when you're already classified as, like, why? Why do you think that is?
For the wokeness, right?
For the what? For the what?
For the wokeness, right? To be
exactly for the wokeness. Because the biscuit, that's my saying, right? They wanted the biscuit. Do you know what affirmative action is?
Yeah.
So affirmative action was a program specifically designed for Black people, right? So that they can basically get some wealth to build, whatever, right? And long story short, right, since affirmative action was put in place, they said, okay, well, let's not make this program for Black people. Let's make it for everybody. Let's make it for all ethnic minorities. And you know what an ethnic minority in the States is? Anybody who's not a white man is considered an ethnic minority. You understand? So the number one benefactors of affirmative action programs happen to be white women, okay, who basically take up almost half of affirmative action programs, and Black people get 1/10% of affirmative action money. You understand? So and that's why they all of a sudden want to be classified as ethnic minorities, because they want to get this biscuit, some of that affirmative action money. But guess what happened? The Arab community, after they looked at the stats, they said, well, the Arabs are making more money than the white people, right? So why are you want to do this? Yeah, exactly. You understand? You understand? So anyways, why did I go through all this long spiel, right? Because you were mentioning about, the Afghan community and whatnot. These communities, they come here, they get classified as classes higher than Black, including South Asians. You understand? They come here specifically with the goal and the purpose to benefit from the biscuit. You understand? And in the States right now, every Muslim group is increasing in the amount of their masajid, except for who? Except for one group. I'll give you one guess who that is.
The Black community.
The Black community. They're the only ones who are decreasing in the amount of masajid. And why do you think that is? Because we have some sort of cohesive Islamic unity that are working together and stuff? No, it's because these groups from other Eastern countries, from Muslim groups, they come over here and they participate in the system, the white supremacist system, in order to get the biscuit. And that's why. You understand?
So then what incentive do people have to be a unified Muslim ummah?
Yeah, there you go. If it's not for Islam, then what is it? If you're not doing it for the sake of Allah, then what is it? Because obviously you like getting the cake from the piece of the pie from Fir'aun and them. You understand? It's you can turn a blind eye to your brother, you know, eating the crumbs from the floor while you're getting a piece of the pie. It's easy. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned this anyways. He said that, you know, the enemy will divide you up.
Share that fact you had shared earlier on your channel about what happened after Malcom X died in the American.
Yes.
Yeah, please tell us that.
This is a prime example. This is a prime example that Malcom X died, okay, or rahimahullah, okay? And he couldn't get a janazah at any mosque, even though there was Muslims in the States at that time. You know why? Because the Muslims at that time said that Malcom X was not a Muslim, and he had to get buried at a Baptist church. And furthermore, they felt that if they help Malcom X, the government will come after them. These are our Muslim. This is the Muslim Brotherhood that we're practicing. Now in 2021, everybody and their mama is claiming Malcom X. You know what I'm saying? Because his legacy, mashallah, is
one of the biggest legends in the modern Muslim times.
Exactly.
One of the biggest legends in the modern Muslim times couldn't even get a Islamic janazah because people were like,
couldn't
"Oh
even
no!"
get an Islamic janazah.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
And
that was the racism factor going on there too.
Exactly.
How did the racism factor play out? Because I remember in that video you were discussing how the government didn't want to legitimize Malcom X, so they pressured the other Muslim communities to kind of go with the narrative that he wasn't mainstream Muslim. He died upon Nation of Islam.
The government didn't do that to the mainstream Muslim community.
What happened?
The mainstream Muslim community acted based upon their fear of the government. You understand? And they continue to do the same thing up until this day. You have these brown people that just got here yesterday that want to speak up for all of us, don't know what's happening, don't know what's going on, right? And they feel that they should be speaking up for all of us, talking about Islamophobia and stuff, and they're just making an incredible mess. And they're actually weakening Islam, talking about they're helping Islam, because all they want to do is appease Pharaoh. That's all they want to do. They want to sit in Pharaoh's court and stuff, right? So now, after 9/11, let's take you back a bit, okay? Before 9/11, right, Islam was submission to the will of Allah. That's what Islam meant. Islam meant submission to the will of Allah. After 9/11, the meaning of Islam changed. What did it change to?
How it changed is that they basically said, we're going to do what it takes to survive, and whatever they want us to say, that's what we're going to do.
So what are we doing here now? What are we really doing here? You understand? A little bit of fitna happens now. All of a sudden, Islam goes from meaning submission to the will of Allah to Islam means peace, so that you can, you know, appease some Pharaoh's soldiers and stuff.
What's your opinion on
they're doing what they're supposed to do? You understand? Ain't nothing changed.
So but
when you make these type of weak, cowardly moves, you understand? When you don't even have to, you like that was not necessary, but because you fear them and you show them that you fear them, you understand? You empower them and you weaken the Ummah. You didn't do the Muslims any favors by changing the meaning of Islam.
What's your opinion on the Black Lives Matter movement, given that the Black Lives Matter movement is supported by the same like wokeness people that are doing like dividing up the Muslim Ummah?
There's Black Lives Matter, the grassroots, right, which has nothing to do with the organization, right? You understand? It's just a grassroots type thing, right? And then there's Black Lives Matter, the organization, right? Most Black people want nothing to do with the organization. You understand? But when they say Black Lives Matter, that is a response to anti-Black racism, particularly when it comes to
police killings and stuff.
Police killings.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? It's
so
something
the
that
movement is organic,
yeah.
but then The movement is organic, but then it got
the movement itself was organic. And after George Floyd was killed, right? What was the demographic of the vast majority of people in the streets? What were they?
There were Black people.
There were Black people. Watch the protest again.
White people?
White people. And not only was it in the States, it was international, right? It was the vast majority of the protesters were white people, international. Even in Japan, they were protesting. You understand? Even in Syria, they're putting up murals and stuff of George Floyd. You understand? So people know, they have a consciousness of what's going on with racism. However, we have this deafening silence from the Muslim community that they just won't call it out. And it's very few who will call it out. And when the ones who call it out with no dust, the ones who are calling out racism, they get called racist by other Muslims. Shout out to Wajdi Academy, right? You know what I'm saying? You know, Muslims who are standing up against racism get called racist. That's what happens in a Muslim community.
Yeah, there's a lot to this. And I think I can see why I can see where the denial is coming from in the Muslim community, because no one wants to admit that there's a problem this bad. You know,
yeah, it's bad. It's incredibly bad. You know, your existence in the West, if you're from the East, your entire existence in the West, the reason why you're here is because of racism. You can't cut it you can't cut that cake any other way. Some imperialist country went to your country, screwed it up. You left it there, came over here to get the biscuit, and now you're up here building up white supremacy off the resources of other poor countries. Like, how else you explain that?
So then we have to circle back then to what would be the solution for Muslims. Like, how can we go about making a pure community?
Yeah, again,
because most people are ethnically divided and most communities are based on ethnicity. You know, like they might welcome some other people into their community, but the community itself is like, that's just, and someone might say, okay, well, that just happened to be that way. Again, with the whole opportunistic, that just happened. All the Pakistanis moved into this area, so it became a Pakistani masjid. All the Afghans moved into this area, so it became Afghani masjid. All the brothers from this country, so it became that masjid, and so forth. You know, and so how?
Yeah,
how
bro.
On
this point here, before I answer that question, you see how you mentioned the Pakistanis move here, the Afghanis move here. Recently in the UK, they came up with this law. It's called the Nation Borders Law or something like that, right? Where they can arbitrarily deport anybody to their home countries, even if they're so-called British citizens, i.e. brown people, okay? We're talking about Bangladeshis or Pakistanis here, right? They're looking for a way to kick out, you know, these people who thought they were British, right? So I did a video, a small video, where this Bengali and a Pakistani woman, she was saying, you know, you expect me to go back to Punjab? She's Pakistani, okay? You expect me to go back to Punjab and blah, blah, blah. She's dissing her own country of origin, you know what I mean? Because she was born and raised in Britain. No hijab, nothing. That's the self-hate that Muslims have. This Bengali guy, he is darker than me, bro. Bengali, okay? And he's like, am I British? Am I British? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, fool, you're not British. Do you have a mirror? What do you think was going to happen? And this is how, like, head in the clouds Muslims are, man. They don't understand what's happening. You know what I'm saying? They legit think that they're British, and you're not. You're not British. Okay, you're Bengali, bro. And if they decide to make a law to kick you out the country, they're gonna do it, and there's nothing you can do about it. You understand? Which comes to the point where you're saying about Islamic unity, right? The only way we can achieve actual Islamic unity, of course, is, we were talking about this before, actual going back to what the Quran and the Sunnah is saying, with the way the Sahaba understood it, right? This is the only way that Islamic unity can actually be achieved. You understand? And we don't need to worry about numbers so much. We just need a few people on the same page trying to achieve that and working towards it, right? And then the success will come from Allah. You understand? You understand? But we can't be worried about, you know, people in La La Land, right, thinking that this stuff doesn't exist. You show them in plainly, and they're still in denial. We're gonna expect a lot of people to be in denial and whatnot.
I do expect a lot of people to be in denial.
Yeah.
And I can see why, as you said, people don't like you because they're like, no, it can't be true. So then they're just,
yeah, it can't be true. Yeah, they're comfortable. They're real comfortable.
But I think the point is that it's a feeling, right? Like you were saying, racism as a feeling. So they say, I don't feel that way about my Muslim brothers and sisters, therefore it doesn't exist. I feel like I am accepted into the masjid that I go to, therefore that masjid's head or the board doesn't participate in this type of political, or not political necessarily, but like getting the biscuit, like you were saying. So because I feel that way, therefore it can't be true, and there must be something wrong with what Brother Bilal is saying because I don't feel that way. So I think that's a good point, how you redefined racism, not as how I feel towards my brothers, but the political system, how how it puts people in a certain position from birth based on the color of your skin.
Exactly. You understand? So, and if you're getting the biscuit based upon racism, are you more likely to fight against it, or are you more likely to defend it? And this is the position that Muslims have been put in, and they can't see it because they have been benefiting off of racism. So now they're like caught in a crossroads. Do I keep defending the system, or do I do something to make it, you know, better, or make it crumble, or whatever it is? You know what I mean? That's really what it comes down to. You know what I'm saying? But
yeah, I understand.
But again, this is not something that will happen overnight. It will, if it happens at all, because we don't know, right? We don't know. But at least, do you know Surah Al-Kahf by any chance? Okay, in Surah Al-Kahf, right? Allah talks about these 7 youth, right? And how they ran with their religion from the powers that be at that time, and they went to the cave and they hid there, right, to protect themselves from being, you know, executed by the powers that be at that time, right? We are really close to that time where if we don't act like now,
I think people don't believe it because, and I just want to say, like, people who are like, okay, we live in America, they're not going to do this, we have our rights, or we live in Europe, we're not going to do this, we have our rights. But if they really wanted to, legally, they could easily redefine Islam from religion to political ideology. And therefore, all of your religious rights theoretically, all of your religious rights could be taken away. And then it'd be very easy from that point on to do, for example, what they did to the Japanese during World War II. America put all of the Japanese in internment camps, and they were American citizens, but because of their lineage, they're like, all right, you're going into an internment camp, and you're going to hold you there until the end of the war or whatever. So, and then there's multiple different examples of how you might think that your country has your back, right? But only to realize that no, like they could easily just flip the script and say, nope, today, for the sake of stability of our state, you are all going into these little camps here, and we're going to keep you there until we figure out what to do with you guys.
I'm very glad you mentioned this point. And this is something so important for Muslims to understand, that the people, these European colonial powers, right, are so savvy and so smooth at this racism game, they will implement racism, you won't even know it. And there's two parts to this particular point that you made. This is the first part, is why I'm against the term or the ideology of Islamophobia as a concept. I'm totally against that, and I'll explain that in a minute. And the second part is that these devils will hide behind language, right? And tell you that their policies are not racist. They're actually fair. And they'll use language to, what do you mean? In the 60s, when Nixon, it was Nixon, I believe, when he was president, late 60s, okay? Right, he was just like a pure racist, right? But he couldn't say, you know, let's find some excuse to arrest the niggas, right? He couldn't say that, right? But what he did, he how did he go after Black people? He said that we need to criminalize drugs, right? We got to go after the drug addicts, right, and the criminals, right? And who were the so-called drug addicts and criminals? Specifically Black people. You understand? Specifically Black people. So that's how they basically, that's how the whole war, this whole war and drugs kind of started, right? You know what I mean? Even when white people were doing drugs and whatnot, but he was using language to get as a means to attack Black people. In what you would call it, in Quebec today, like right now, right? There's a bill called Bill 21, right? They can't say we don't want Muslims working in our schools or in our public places. Well, what did they do? They said, we are not allowing anybody to wear religious headgear.
And who else wears religious headgear?
Yeah, religious headgear. We are a secular province, and therefore, by the order of our secularity, you cannot publicly display your religious headgear in government places. And that's how they were able to make sure no hijabis showed up in public spaces. You understand? Same thing in France. They hide behind language. You know, and they've been doing this this is nothing new. They've been doing this literally for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. I mean, from the time they came up with the pure blood laws, as we mentioned. From that time, they've been doing this. And just because you found out yesterday, don't mean it's something new. You know what I'm saying? So your denial of how the system is not gonna change the reality of it. You feel me?
So I want people to get the message correctly. When we're talking about these things, it's not necessarily that your ethnicity doesn't matter and you must and you're a racist if you don't marry someone outside of your ethnicity or anything like that. It's more the case of we are, because we're oppressed, we're oppressing others within our own community so that we can stand a little bit taller. It's not necessarily I love my brother in Islam no matter what his color is. It's not like that. It's that we're engaging in a system where we're oppressing others so that we could stand taller. I think that is the main point you're trying to get across.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's you know, we practice Islam like a crab bucket. You know crab bucket.
Yeah.
You know, all the crabs are
when they come up.
Yeah, exactly. Just pulling them down, and you know what I mean. And nobody can get out. You understand? But that's how we practice Islam. You know, we practice Islam in a crab bucket, and we have this type of. We talked about this too earlier about this lay and pray idea about Islam.
I do agree.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I do agree with the idea, because like in America, for example, the black community masajid seem to be very isolated from the other masajid. Like when there's an event where all of the masajid are gathering together in the area for a fundraiser, you'd never see the communities, the black communities or their imam representatives being there at the same time. It's usually the Arabs and the Asians, Southeast Asians and so forth. They're teaming up, their imams are meeting, they're getting together, planning, getting things done. but the masajid from other areas are not necessarily invited into those events. So that is just a brief observation that I would like to say.
It's funny you mentioned that, because it wasn't like that back in the day.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, it was the black imams right back in the day that were pretty much in the forefront of the dawah. We had Siraj al-Hajj, Abdul Hakim Quick, Bilal Phillips, Khalid Yassin. You know, these were the kind guys, kind of like everybody wanted to come to their masajid, right? And there's nothing wrong with having a cultural enclave as a concept. There's no problem with that. The problem comes in with that whole entire, what you mentioned, the crab bucket mentality. You understand? So now you're not going to help your other brothers because you got your enclave. As a matter of fact, you'll be silent about white supremacy, completely silent about white supremacy, as long as you get the biscuit.
Yeah. You know, we should wrap up. I'll let you have some finishing words, but I do want to mention this from the Sirah, a very important story that people don't realize, because we don't really know our history that well. But in the battle against Musaylim ibn al-Kadhdhab, Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu, he had his battalion set up, and he had divided them up in some organized way that he wanted to do it. And he noticed that they weren't doing that good in the battle. And he realized that's because he divided them up, not based on their tribes, but he mixed up the tribes together. So they were complaining about that. So then when he redivided the lines, he was like, okay, I'm gonna redivide it based on tribes. So every unit or every battalion belongs to its own tribe. Since you all know each other, you all fighting with each other. And he noticed that they were doing better in the wars, right? Better in the battles. And they eventually won, obviously, that battle against Musaylim ibn al-Kadhdhab. So there is nothing wrong, like you were saying, with people like coming together. Oh, he's from my culture, we're just hanging out. It's a cultural thing. But they were all, even though he divided the battalions by tribe, they were all working towards the same goal.
Oh, exactly.
They were all watching each other's backs. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And the moment, and they all knew who the leader was too. So it wasn't like, oh, my tribe is better, so I should have this position. It was based on merit. So there's nothing wrong, like you were saying, about people from different communities having their own masajid, because it's just a numbers thing at the end of the day. Like if all of the people are in that community, well, that masjid is going to have an Afghan imam. You know, that's just like, what do you expect? But the thing is that we're all working towards the same goal. And I'm not against the communities mixing. I just haven't seen it happen, except if it's an area, again, where it's a city area and everyone is mixed, then the masjid will probably be mixed as well. And Allah knows best. But yeah, go ahead. I interrupted you, so go ahead, brother.
Yeah, so that's the whole point, right? They were working together for the same goal. You understand? And as a matter of fact, Allah says in the Quran that, you know, He created you in nations and tribes so you can know each other, right? There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with being amongst your own people, you know. You know, if you want to be around white people because you're white, there's no big deal, right? You're more comfortable with white people. I'm more comfortable with black people. And that's not a thing, you know. It's like you're more comfortable with people that you're more like anyways, right? No problem, right? This is the issue, okay? The issue is that we claim that we have this type of brotherhood, we have the best religion, you know what I'm saying? We have the truth and whatnot. This is a whole bunch of claims, but when it comes to practice, our religion becomes comfort. You know what I mean? Our comfort takes precedence over our pain. You understand? And if you believe that you're upon the truth, then you have to go through some pain. You understand? And that's the issue. Muslims generally, especially the ones from the East and whatnot, because they've been through so much pain in their own countries, they're not trying to come to the West to experience more pain. And these are very old psychological tactics. Like you were mentioning about breaking the slaves. You know, how did they break the slaves? They would break them psychologically. You know, they would torture them, beat them, whatever. You understand?
Yeah.
And so that's how they broke them. You know, said there was experiments done by the Koreans in the Korean War, right? When they would capture their prisoners of war or whatnot, you know, they would torture them so much, right? And like some really original types of torture anyways, right? But anyways, they would sell out their own battalions for chocolate bars.
Oh.
For a chocolate bar. You understand? That's how deep it got. So now, because of our comfort, we don't want to go back to that discomfort. But really, the truth of the matter is that unless we are brave enough to stand up like for the religion in the way it's supposed to be stood up for, everybody's going to be uncomfortable. Everybody. And nobody's going to be comfortable.
Yeah, what happens to the Black community in America today is going to happen to the Arab community and all the other communities tomorrow. It's only a matter of time, really.
And it's funny you mention that, because I always keep saying the Black struggle is the Muslim struggle. What's happening to the Muslims right now already happened to Black people. You know, and that's why you're talking about Islamophobia today.
I've said that on my channel too.
The term Islamophobia is because it makes Muslims almost like an ethnic group, like this type of marginalized ethnic group that have been oppressed for so long, and you know what I mean? And it turns them into, it otherizes Muslims. So now Islam is no longer the religion of truth. Islam is those people that look like that dress like that, you understand? So if you see a hijabi and you don't like her, now you're an Islamophobe. You understand?
Yeah. It's redefining what we are. You know,
exactly.
I've said something similar on my channel before, whereas like, don't think that like what's going on in the Rohingya Muslims, to the Rohingya Muslims, and no one did anything about it. Don't think that that's not going to somehow happen to us just because we're living in the West, you know, or like what's going on with the Uyghur Muslims, like just because they're all the way over there. Oh, that's not, America's not China. They would never do something like that. Or Europe isn't China.
Right. Like that shows how ignorant you are of the history of the West. They've done this, the same that's happening in China. They've done it 1,000 times over in the West.
So I also want to, like, there's so much we can go on, because like recently I've had brothers of mine who are like dark-skinned or even Black marrying Syrians. So I have seen in the new generation, the new generation, like our generation and the people younger than us, this idea that they really are breaking boundaries to the idea that, okay, you know, our parents might have been racist, or our great-grandparents might have been racist, but we're not. We actually don't think that way. And so I do believe that your message is good even for people like us or people like that who are pretty comfortable hanging out with people from different cultures or whatever. It doesn't really matter to them, because the system being in place, the idea of the system being there still has to be addressed. You know, like the person who is in his own little world or in his own little enclave, but he's helping the Muslim community, regardless of where they're from or who they're from, or doesn't know their language, doesn't understand their culture, but he's helping as best as he can, is much better than the person who's hanging out. He's multicultural with everybody, but he has no idea what's going on, and he's not necessarily benefiting the situation, but he isn't racist, and he's not racist because he doesn't feel that way towards his brothers and sisters, but doesn't understand the system that he's a part of. So I think it's very aware to be like, unplug ourselves from the matrix, so to speak.
Exactly. And I couldn't have said it better, man. Like that's pretty much what it comes down to. And
like
Trump, that's why
Trump says, I got a lot of Black friends. I'm not racist.
I know, right? Like, I'm sure you do. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure you do, you know. As follows.
Very much.
His father was a clanny, right? You know what I'm saying?
Pictures of it online too.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Is that anything?
Biden himself was he bragged about being the youngest.
Was he doing blackface too?
Who? Biden? I don't know. I don't know if he did blackface, but I mean,
what was he bragging about?
He was bragging about being the youngest Dixiecrat. Okay. He fought against busing in black areas to white schools during segregation. You know, he introduced the 3 strikes bill, like a whole bunch of just blatant racist policies, as black people still voted him in. And you think there's nothing wrong with the system?
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh, everyone. This is Mr. Middle Path, and unfortunately, the recording stopped in the middle of the conversation. My laptop died, but it's okay, inshallah. We were wrapping up the conversation anyways, and I felt like we could have been going on for another 2-3 hours. So inshallah, definitely going to be having Brother Bilal on for another conversation, inshallah, to go over this more. A lot of what was said might be things that people don't know about, might be some controversial things. So agree, disagree, please leave your thoughts in the comments below so we can have that discussion, inshallah. Anyways, Jazakallah khair for listening, everybody. And as always, take care. Peace out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.